$10,000. That's the number sitting on the table in front of a grieving family. No music yet. No narration. Just a funeral director, a folder, and a total at the bottom of a page. For a few hours of ceremony, no music yet. No narration. Just a funeral director, a folder, and a total at the bottom of a page. For a casket. For a car ride most people never think about. For paperwork that has to be filed correctly or nothing else can happen. So where does all that money actually go? Because the strange part about a funeral bill isn't how much it costs. It's how many different businesses, services, products, and hidden expenses are sitting quietly behind that one number. And before this story is over, we're going to follow that $10,000, dollar by dollar, until the number stops looking like a price and starts looking like something else entirely. Here's the first twist. A funeral isn't one product, it just looks like one. Behind that single total can be professional services, use of a facility, preparation of the body, transportation, a casket or container, cemetery-related costs, flowers, an obituary, death certificates and permits, and the ceremony itself. Not every funeral includes all of these. Prices shift by city, by provider, by the choices a family makes, by whether it ends in burial or cremation. There is no single American funeral price. There's only this one hypothetical family and their hypothetical $10,000. So when they look at that total, they aren't really buying one thing. They're buying an entire chain of services stitched together into a single afternoon. But that raises the obvious question. Which part actually costs the most? Let's build a receipt. Not a real one, a hypothetical one, so we can watch the money move. Professional services, use of the facility, transportation, merchandise, preparation, and a category most families barely notice, third-party expenses. Some of these dollars stay with the funeral home, others get passed straight through to outside providers, and that's where the economics get complicated fast. Start with the part everyone sees first, the casket. Some are simple, others cost thousands of dollars. What actually changes between them? Materials, construction, hardware, finish. How it was built, how far it traveled, how it was purchased and marked up along the way. There's no single industry-wide markup we can point to. It depends on the piece, the supplier, the store. But here's what matters. The casket is one of the most visible purchases in a funeral. Visibility, though, doesn't automatically mean it's where the real profit lives. Because one of the most expensive parts of a funeral may not arrive in a box at all. It arrives as people. Behind every funeral is a small, quiet workforce most families never think about. A funeral director, sometimes an embalmer, assistants, drivers, administrative staff, people cleaning and maintaining a building that has to look composed at 3 in the afternoon and be ready to receive a call at 3 in the morning. The family sees a ceremony that lasts 2 hours. The business may have spent days preparing for it, coordinating, scheduling, filing documents, arranging transportation, making sure every detail lands correctly on a day that cannot be redone. The visible event is only the surface. Underneath it is labor the bill doesn't fully explain. And that labor never really clocks out. A funeral home doesn't operate like a retail store. Death doesn't check the hours posted on the door. That means on-call staff. Refrigeration that has to run whether or not anyone dies that week. Vehicles that have to be maintained and fueled and insured. Waiting. Equipment. Scheduling systems. Compliance paperwork. record keeping that has to be exact, because there is no room for error in this particular kind of business. A funeral home isn't simply selling a service when someone walks through the front door. It's maintaining a system that has to be ready the moment the phone rings. And that readiness costs money every single day, including the days when the phone doesn't ring at all. Now, here's where the story takes a sharper turn. Because not all of that $10,000 stays with the funeral home. Depending on what the family chooses, part of it may move outward, to a cemetery or crematory, to clergy or an officiant, to musicians, to a florist, to the government offices that issue death certificates and permits, to a newspaper or website running the obituary. Some of these might be paid by the family directly. Others get folded into the funeral home's bill and passed along. Which means the $10,000 isn't necessarily $10,000 of funeral home revenue. Some of it was never really theirs to begin with. It just passed through their hands on its way somewhere else. So if the funeral home doesn't keep all of it, how does the business actually make money? This is where we have to destroy the biggest misconception in the entire story. A $10,000 sale does not mean $10,000 of profit. Not close. Subtract the cost of the merchandise itself. Subtract labor, vehicles and fuel, utilities, insurance, facility upkeep, equipment, regulatory compliance, marketing, administrative overhead, financing, if the building or the fleet was purchased with debt, taxes. Then, and only then, is there something left over that could be called profit. The number that shocks the family isn't necessarily the number that matters most to the business. The real question was never what came in, it's what's left after everything else has been paid. And some of what has to be paid is bolted to the ground. A funeral home needs a physical building, viewing rooms, chapel space, offices, a preparation area, storage, parking, accessibility for grieving families who may not be at their most capable moment. Real estate costs vary enormously. A facility in the middle of a major city carries a completely different cost structure than one in a small town 2 hours away. The building itself can quietly become one of the largest long-term costs the business carries. But the biggest advantage some funeral homes hold isn't the building at all. It's something much harder to build and much harder to buy. Trust. Families rarely choose a funeral provider the way they choose a restaurant. There's no leisurely comparison shopping. The decision often gets made in a matter of hours. Under emotional weight, most people only carry a few times in their lives. In that moment, reputation matters. Familiarity matters. A name a family has heard before, in their own community, matters. This isn't about families being irrational. It's about people wanting reliability when the stakes are the highest they'll ever be. In this business, the most valuable asset may not be the casket in the showroom. It may be the reputation that was built long before that particular phone ever rang. And reputation is exactly what a new competitor can't manufacture overnight. Decades of local trust, an established location, experienced staff, existing vendor relationships, systems that already work. A brand new funeral home can't simply purchase those things on day one. In some markets, that becomes a genuine advantage that's difficult for anyone new to close. So what happens when one company owns more than one location? The picture starts to shift. Some funeral homes are independently owned, run by one family for one community, exactly as they appear. Others belong to larger ownership groups that operate multiple locations, sharing administration, purchasing power, marketing, and technology across all of them. Neither model is the whole industry. Both exist side by side. But when scale enters the picture, the business starts looking less like a single funeral home standing alone and more like a network, quietly connected behind the scenes. Now let's go back to that $10,000 and finally follow it to the end. Part of it goes to professional services, part to merchandise, part to labor and daily operations, part to transportation, part toward the cost of the building itself, part outward to cemeteries, clergy, florists and government offices, part to overhead that never appears anywhere on the printed receipt. And only after every one of those pieces has been paid does anything remain that could become profit. Suddenly, $10,000 doesn't look like one giant payday. It looks like a complicated financial machine with dozens of moving parts, most of them invisible to the people paying the bill. Which brings us back to that quiet room. The same family, the same receipt. $10,000 printed at the bottom of the page. But look at it again, and it isn't the same number anymore. Behind it are the people who prepared everything. The building that has to be maintained whether it's used or not. The vehicles, the equipment, the merchandise, and everyone who touched it before it arrived. The outside providers who were paid along the way. The years spent earning a reputation nobody could buy in a single afternoon. The readiness that costs money every day of the year, whether or not anyone calls. The risks the business absorbs quietly. And finally, whatever is left over, if anything is left over at all. You thought you were looking at a $10,000 funeral. You were actually looking at dozens of economic decisions happening all at once, compressed into a single line on a single page. The funeral home doesn't simply sell a funeral, it sells coordination for a family who, in the worst week of their lives, needs someone else capable of handling everything. That's what makes this industry so strange to study. It combines necessity with urgency, trust with real estate, physical merchandise with deeply human service. A business that has to run 24 hours a day, prepared for a customer who never wants to be shopping in the first place. Nobody walks in excited. Nobody compares 5 options the way they'd compare hotels. They're making decisions during one of the hardest moments life will ever hand them, which is exactly why trust, availability, and quiet competence become the most valuable currency in the entire transaction. The real money was never hiding in one casket. It wasn't hiding in one hearse. It wasn't hiding in one funeral. It was spread across the entire system that made that funeral possible in the first place. Now picture the building after everyone has gone home. The chairs are empty. The lights are dimmed. The parking lot is quiet again. The family saw a final bill. The funeral home saw a business. The employees saw a job that had to be done exactly right. The vendors saw an order fulfilled. The cemetery saw a service scheduled and completed. And moving behind every one of them, unseen, was an entire economy. Passing money from one hand to the next, one obligation at a time. Because the real secret behind a $10,000 funeral was never that someone gets rich from death. It's that an entire business ecosystem has quietly been built around everything that has to happen after the phone rings. So if you had to spend $10,000 on a funeral, which part of that bill would you want explained first?